The third year he was married to Michael Smith, he kept everyone in the dark about me and kept younger, more delicate girls on the side. Everyone around me said that I was his moonlight, his soft underbelly. But he laughed when he was drunk and said, "Ah, Amanda Green, marrying her only to find out that she's nothing more than that." The man who swore he would love me forever when he was 17. The man who swore at 17 that he'd love me for the rest of my life was hugging a young girl and cooing, "She's so boring, of course I love you the most, baby." The day I left, as usual, no one saw anything strange. The maid smiled and asked me if I was going out for tea. I smiled back lightly and nodded, "No need to prepare dinner tonight. I heard that you have other hearts, and I am going to destroy them. When the wind is blowing, I will burn it." Unbeknownst to Michael Smith, Amanda Green is a stubborn woman. Forgiveness was never in her vocabulary. I hugged my coat, the bag in my hand containing liver pills. The corridor was long, and the shadows of the lamps fell on the canvases, refracting splashes of light. Few more fell all over the floor. In the room at the end, there was a loud burst of coos and laughter. The whole floor of this place has been reserved by Michael Smith all year round. No one was allowed half a step closer, so they didn't even close the door. The heel of my shoe tripped on the shag of the carpet as I bent over. The necklace between my necks suddenly broke. Pearls of all sizes tumbled to the ground. My heart stung inexplicably. I was about to crouch down and pick up the beads. I heard Michael Smith's voice. "Don't, I'm not as promiscuous as you guys. My first love, the white moonlight, the love of my life, is only my wife." He was about as drunk as he could be, and his drunken voice was tinged with pride and smugness. I couldn't help but purse my lips, holding the cool pearls. My heart felt as if it had been ironed and stretched. "It's just a shame." Michael Smith suddenly sighed, married to the hand to realize, but also no more. I suddenly clenched my palm. The pearls pressed against the soft flesh of my palm, and my smile stiffened at the corners of my lips. "What about me, Michael Smith?" A soft female voice suddenly rang out. With a bit of unwilling aggression and resentment, "You said that the love of your life is only your wife, so what do you take me for? Obviously last night you said you love me the most." The men laughed. "Silly sister, do you believe what men say in bed? Besides, it's only natural for a man to love his wife. What's the point of being a mistress and fighting for favor? Michael Smith, look at them." The girl's voice was filled with tears. She sounded so pathetic and heartbreaking. "Okay, why are you guys messing with her? What's a mistress? This is my serious girlfriend, watch what you say." Michael Smith's voice sank slightly, as if he was a bit upset. "No way, Brother Yen, are you serious?" Michael Smith softly, "She has been with me since she was 18, I have to be responsible." "What a beast, you've just become an adult and you're doing it. Aren't you afraid that your sister-in-law will make trouble with you?" Michael Smith laughed, "She's dependent on me, how can she make trouble with me? But you'd better keep your mouth shut. I love my wife very much, I don't want to upset her." "You love your wife. What about me?" The little girl was defiant again. Michael Smith reached out and pulled her to him, cradling her in his arms and coaxing her. "What's the point of shedding beans over this?" The little girl choked back a sob. "Michael Smith, I want you to say that you love me the most. Even if you lie to me, I'm willing to do it." "Well baby, she's so boring, of course she loves you the most." I stood in the dark shadows outside the door and suddenly I was smiling. The man who had sworn to love me for the rest of his life. At this moment, he was coaxing a much younger girl. But I didn't even want to walk in and question him. Once unfaithful, 100 times unfaithful. I turned around and walked down the long hallway I'd come from. 17-year-old Michael Smith secretly carved my name into his desk. He said Michael Smith loved Amanda Green for the rest of his life. But his whole life was just 10 years in the blink of an eye. I was already downstairs having breakfast when Michael Smith returned that day. He rushed in, carrying a large bouquet of flowers and gifts. His face was full of apologies and guilt. "I'm sorry wife, I really had a late social engagement last night, so I couldn't make it back." When we got married, he promised that no matter how busy he was, he would never stay out at night. But over the past 6 months, he has been coming home later and later. This time, it was even a whole night without returning. I put down my chopsticks and raised my eyes to look at him. The suit, shirt and tie had all been changed. The smell of his body was clean and crisp. It's hard for him to do it so rigorously. He put the bouquet down and walked over to me wanting to kiss me. Honey, I swear, this is the first and last time. Instead, I raised my hand to block him and asked, word for word. Did you stay at the office last night? Michael Smith half hesitated, yes, and look at the clothes I changed into those you helped me get ready. After saying that, he gripped my shoulders and looked at me a little cautiously. Wife, are you angry? I'll stay with you all day today, I'm not going to the office, okay? I also looked at him, looking at the self reflected in his pupils. His eyes didn't hide, and he didn't feel the slightest bit guilty. And I, too, managed to hide my sadness tightly. No. I pushed his hand away, let's eat first. But just as he sat down, his iPhone rang. I saw him frown and hang up. But it soon rang a second time. He hesitated for a few seconds, and still hung up. Immediately afterward, however, a message came in. Michael Smith read it and his brows instantly knit tight. Bihan, there's a bit of an emergency over at the company. You go ahead. Forget it, I'll let David Brown take care of it first, promise to stay with you all day. He said this, but his face said he was in a dither. No, the company's business is more important, go now. I looked at him calmly, even the pain in my heart became numb. Michael Smith only struggled for a moment before standing up. I'll try to come back early to be with you then. I let out a and watched as he hurriedly got into his car and left. Only in hindsight did I wipe away the cool tears from my face. I called my best friend, Zhen, make an appointment for me to get a medical checkup at your hospital today. I breathed a huge sigh of relief when the results of my physical came back. My body was still clean. I wasn't pregnant either. When I married Michael Smith, I was in very poor health. That's why we never had children. But just in case, I did a detailed examination. Doctor, I would like to ask, how is my body recovering now? It was only after I got an affirmative answer that I felt most of the cloudy air that had been pent up in my heart dissipate. Clutching the report card, I had just walked to the corner of the corridor when I happened to hear Michael Smith's name. Michael Smith, if I'm really pregnant, can I not abort it? I stopped walking and looked at the two men not far away. Michael Smith was holding a cigarette between his fingers, his brow furrowed, a little impatient. And the little girl was veiled and crying her eyes out. She was tugging on his sleeve, shaking and pleading. Michael Smith sneered, my wife hasn't given birth yet, it's your turn? But this is my first baby, I can't let go. I promise I'll be a good boy and I won't give you any trouble. And I'll never let your wife know about me, or the baby. Michael Smith patted her face with his cigarette hand. Don't be naive, baby. There's no way you're having a baby. You do as you're told and I'll buy you a sweet after you get rid of the baby. But if you don't, Sophia Miller, I'll be honest with you. There are plenty of pretty, obedient girls at your college. You could easily sleep with another one every day. You're not the only one. The little girl was so frightened by his words that she turned white with tears on her cheeks. I'll do as I'm told, Michael Smith, you don't want me. Be a good girl and go and get tested. I'll be a good boy and go for the checkup, only, husband, you said before that your wife's health is so bad that she can't have a baby. If I really get pregnant, I'll take it as a birth for her, and she can keep the baby, I won't fight or rob her, okay? Michael Smith was silent for a moment, go for a checkup first, let's talk after the checkup. The little girl huffed and pushed the door to go in. Michael Smith finished his cigarette and put it out. When he turned around, I pretended to be walking towards him. He seemed to freeze for a moment when he saw me. But it quickly changed to a nervous, worried look. Honey, what brings you to the hospital? Are you not feeling well or are you hurt somewhere? Michael Smith gripped my arm and looked anxious. Why didn't you call me and come to the hospital alone? He looked me up and down, his eyes full of eager concern. It was as if his love for me had never waned by half in these 10 years. My hands and feet grew cold. It was as if chills were rising from the seams of my bones. How could Michael Smith act so deeply in love? When he called me his wife in every breath. His mistress was in a room not far away, checking to see if she was pregnant. But he was able to do it in front of me without showing any sign of weakness. So much so, that I could hardly tell the difference. Which Michael Smith was the real Michael Smith? I'm fine. Just visiting a friend. He breathed a long sigh of relief and hugged me, you scared me, wife. Michael Smith, were you worried about me? I asked softly, looking at him. Can you not be worried? He hugged me very, very tightly. You were in such poor health when I married you. It took me 3 years of hard work to get you better. Honey, do you know that I was scared out of my wits when I saw you just now? If anything happens to you, how can I live? I wanted to smile, but the corners of my mouth were stiff. But my lips were trembling, as if I had a mouthful of hot oil in my mouth. I asked him, then what are you doing in the hospital? His arm around me tightened slightly. Oh, I came to see a senior who was hospitalized. But this was the obstetrics and gynecology department. But I didn't tear him down. Michael Smith drove me home with my iPhone ringing. He simply turned it off. I'm staying home with you even if the King of Heaven comes today. I didn't say anything, just looked out the window at the street scene. On the way back, we passed by our high school alma mater. The familiar scene by scene, in the past is sweet. Now it's a honey-coated blade poking and prodding at my heart. My vision somehow blurred. And at the same time, I seemed to see Michael Smith and me again. Amanda Green, will you stop being mad? Please, just listen to me, just listen to one sentence. Okay, just one sentence. 2 sentences. 2 sentences, okay? Teenager Michael Smith playfully tugged on my sleeve. Get lost, Michael Smith. Don't cry, hit me, Amanda Green, whip me as hard as you can, just don't shed any tears. The iPhone in my bag suddenly ding-donged. It interrupted my thoughts and brought me back to reality. I took out my iPhone, and the message was from an unfamiliar number. He said you're not in good health and you can't have fun every time. We haven't changed positions in 3 years of marriage, he's had enough. He doesn't like to use condoms, and says if he gets pregnant, he'll let me have the baby, since you can't get pregnant anyway. Mrs. Chow, you're so useless, why are you occupying the seat? I suddenly laughed. Michael Smith looked at me curiously. Honey, what's so happy? I locked the screen and said without moving, my girlfriend asked me out for afternoon tea, but I forgot, and she's scolding me. Michael Smith seemed to be suddenly relieved. Then you still want to go? Of course, otherwise Zhen won't let me go for 3 days. You can go to the office and do your work. Michael Smith looked unhappy. I'm jealous of Emily Johnson. You always favor her. I really don't want you to go. Isn't it nice for us to be alone? I looked back at him, but he had already swerved and was ready to turn around. I smiled and turned my face. There's still time for that later. That's right, we have our whole lives ahead of us. I won't argue with Emily Johnson this time. He dropped me off at the private club and drove off in a hurry. Half an hour later, Sophia Miller messaged me again. Did he dump you? Look, he says all I have to do is cry and he goes soft. By the way, I'm pregnant, and he said I should have it, and he said he likes daughters, but I want to give him a son. I've done the math. I'm sure I'll have a son. It's just a shame that the doctor wouldn't let us have sex during the first trimester, and I haven't even worn the new underwear he bought me. He's always had a lot of needs, and you can't satisfy him, so he must be suffocating. I didn't reply, I just took screenshots of all the messages she sent and saved them. My hands were shaking a bit when I did this. Maybe Michael Smith had gotten too involved in his acting over the years. I was also naive enough to trust him too much. So when this ridiculous and extravagant side of him was revealed, I still couldn't control my emotions. It turned out that all the tenderness in bed that moved me was also all fake. He had long since abandoned our lukewarm affair. When I thought restraint was love, reality slapped me hard. The decreasing coitus is not because of love and heartache, but cannot enjoy, so even perfunctory are lazy perfunctory. Before going home, I called my former mentor. Bihan? You kid, what took you so long to call your teacher? Teacher, do you still need people for your expedition team? I want to join. Are you physically able? Actually, I wanted to join when I graduated. My teacher especially wanted me to join her. But my health was too poor at that time, and the team had to travel all over the country and abroad. The conditions in many places were harsh, and sleeping in the open was a common occurrence. I've just had a medical checkup, and the doctor said I'll be fine as long as I take care of myself. Is your husband willing? Bihan, you should know that if you join us, you'll be on the road for years. And many of our programs are state secrets. We're almost out of touch with our families. Teacher, I've decided to get a divorce. Did he do something wrong to you? I smiled and nodded my head, swallowing down my tears. Yes, he cheated on me. After 10 years of your relationship, have you really made up your mind? Teacher, do you still remember the words you said to me when you wanted a divorce? I heard that you have another heart, so I will destroy it. If you burn it, you'll carry its ashes in the wind. My eyes reddened and tears rolled down. Teacher, you taught me, so of course I'm just like you. Good, good. Bihan, then teacher is waiting for you to come. This would be the first time since my marriage that I have reached out to Michael Smith for money. He smiled pleasantly on the other side of the phone. Honey, isn't all my money yours? You can just swipe my card. That's different. I'm rarely this stubborn. Fine, I'll have David Brown transfer the money to you right now. Michael Smith, I'm not taking your money for nothing. I have a gift for you, too. In 3 days, you go to the communication room of our high school alma mater. Go to Mr. Sung in the communication room. You remember him, right? He'll give you the stuff. Michael Smith smiled at that. How could I not remember? I only transferred in my senior year. I wrote you hundreds of love letters in my freshman and sophomore years, and he received them all. I smiled back. Well, then in 3 days, don't forget to pick them up. I won't, wife. I'm looking forward to it now. The first thing I did when the money Michael Smith transferred to me arrived was to donate it anonymously to the benefactor's expedition. Printed out the divorce papers and screenshots of all the information. Put it in a Ziploc bag and hand-delivered it to the communication room at my alma mater. The broken string of pearls, and the first ring he gave me. Burned and discarded by my own hand in the workshop. Along with it, there were countless love letters he had written to me. Early in the morning on the last day, I accompanied Michael Smith to breakfast as usual. As usual, I walked him to work. Michael Smith was a bit apologetic. I had planned to take you to the hot springs today, but I'd broken my promise. It's okay, work is more important. I looked at him and laughed softly. Go on, don't miss your work. Michael Smith looked at me tenderly but guiltily. Wife, you are always so considerate and nice. Over the years, I've been so busy working that I've spent so little time with you. I looked at him quietly, but my thoughts wandered far away. The young man who once warmed my cold hand in the winter morning mist. The man who once knelt in front of his parents for an entire day in order to marry me. 10 years together, he is still young and handsome. It's true that he loved me. Betrayal is real. Guilt and pity are real. But the heart's desire to indulge in exciting love affairs is also true. I know, I can be deaf and dumb and be Mrs. Chow for the rest of my life. No one can take that position. But I don't want to be his Mrs. Chow anymore. I want to be Amanda Green again. Michael Smith suddenly came forward and hugged me to him. Honey, I love you so much. You wait for me to come back, we'll eat together tonight. I don't know how hard it was to squeeze out a smile. I don't know how hard it was to squeeze out a smile. I don't know how hard it was to hold back the unnecessary and redundant questioning. It was a good thing his iPhone was ringing again like it was on fire. I pushed him away. Go on, don't keep people waiting. He turned around reluctantly, but his steps grew hurried. I smiled and turned to go upstairs. As usual, I changed my clothes and went to the garden to tend to the flowers and trees. A simple meal at noon. Getting up after my lunch break, I changed into clothes for going out. Carrying a bag with me, which contained all my documents and important items. When I went downstairs, the maid asked me with a smile, "Are you going shopping and drinking tea?" I nodded back and smiled lightly. Well, there's no need to prepare dinner tonight. He won't be home for dinner tonight. And I, too, will never come back. The driver dropped me off at my usual clubhouse and left. I went downstairs, and the car arranged by my teacher was already waiting at the street corner. The car was a secret license plate. Ordinary people cannot be found. Clutching the bag in my hand, I crossed the street and got into the car. As the door closed, my iPhone rang. The name flashing on the screen was Michael Smith. I didn't hang up. In my heart, however, I knew very well that this was the last time I would talk to him. Wife. I don't even have the face to talk to you anymore. Michael Smith's voice was full of chagrin and guilt. There is a very important entertainment tonight. I really can't put it off. I won't be able to come home to eat dinner with you. But I promise I'll be home early tonight, okay? Honey, don't be mad. I've asked David Brown to pick up the gift I ordered for you. You're going to love it. I clutched my iPhone and looked out the car window at the endless street. Beyond the hustle and bustle of the traffic, there was an empty silence. The figure that had been in my heart for 10 years. The figure of a teenager wearing a blue and white striped school uniform. In this instant, completely disappeared from my heart. I clearly knew that I finally stopped loving him. "Honey, why don't you say something? Are you angry?" Michael Smith asked cautiously on the other end of the phone. "Forget it, I'll push it off, I won't go, I'll still go back to have dinner with you tonight." "No, it's okay." I lowered my eyes and stared at the empty spot on my ring finger. "You're busy with your own, Zhen has asked me to have dinner with her tonight. I'll try to be back early, okay? If it's too late, you can stay at the office, so you don't have to go back and forth. I'll be back as late as I can." I didn't say anything else. Michael Smith said a few more words and hung up the phone hurriedly. I put my iPhone back into my bag and slowly closed my eyes over the slight bumps in the car. Michael Smith stood by the hallway window with a cigarette in his mouth. It was dark outside and the night was getting late. Amanda Green used to be in poor health and had a very regular routine. At this hour, she should already be asleep. When Sophia Miller came out of the examination room with red eyes, Michael Smith had already put out his cigarette. He glanced at her and asked in a cold voice, "What are the results?" "A little light bleeding. The doctor suggested it would be best to stay in bed for more rest this month. Then you should not go to school classes first, rest at home." "Husband. Then will you stay with me?" Sophia Miller aggressively hugged his arm. Michael Smith frowned and withdrew his hand. "Didn't I tell you not to fucking call me that? There's no one here, I'm just calling." "Alright, I'll have the driver take you back." "Aren't you going to stay with me?" "I'm not feeling well today. I'm afraid I'll bleed again." "Didn't the doctor prescribe medicine?" "Take the medicine and have a good rest." Michael Smith headed straight for the elevator. "I'm not a doctor, it's useless to stay there." Sophia Miller bit her lip and couldn't help but cry again. But fearing Michael Smith's annoyance, she could only hold back her tears and followed him into the elevator. Michael Smith. When she was about to get into the car, Sophia Miller really couldn't hold back and turned around to call out to him again. Michael Smith raised his wrist and looked at his watch, obviously a little impatient. "What's wrong again? Are you coming tomorrow? I thought the doctor said no intercourse this month." Michael Smith raised an eyebrow. "It's no use looking for you. I'm going to be with my wife this month, so you'd better leave me alone." Sophia Miller was furious and aggravated, tears were falling down her face. Michael Smith, mindful of her pregnancy, coaxed her a few times. "Take care of yourself, I'll come and see you when I can," he said. Sophia Miller watched him get into the car and leave without looking back. Tears froze cold on her face, and her teeth ached from biting at some point. She couldn't understand. She was young and beautiful. What was she not better than his sickly wife? Every time she thought of this, she hated her guts. But she could not let go of Michael Smith, also could not let go of Michael Smith, gave her all this. She could only endure it. Michael Smith's car stopped downstairs. When the maid greeted him, he inquired as usual, "Is Mrs. asleep?" The maid, who was receiving his coat, was taken aback. "Isn't Mrs. with you?" Michael Smith stopped abruptly. "What did you say?" The night was deep, only the light of the house enveloped him. Madam went out for tea in the afternoon. When the chauffeur was going to pick her up in the evening, Mrs. said she didn't need to come over, she'd eat out with you. The more the maid spoke, the more alarmed she became, and her voice shook. Mistress explained when she went out this afternoon that there was no need to prepare dinner tonight. Michael Smith suddenly stepped forward and clutched the servant's lapel. "What else did she say? Don't miss a word, tell me clearly." The maid's face turned white with fear. "No, no, 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 no." Michael Smith violently released his hand and pushed the person away. As he sprinted upstairs, he took out his iPhone and called Emily Johnson. "You looking for Bihan? We didn't meet today. But Bihan said back in the afternoon that she had a date with you for dinner tonight." Michael Smith's voice was incredibly calm. A calmness he couldn't even believe. Only no one could see that his hand was shaking as he clutched his iPhone. "Bihan did call me, but I had an operation, so we arranged to meet another day." Michael Smith hung up somehow. He called other friends that Amanda Green was close to. All of them said they hadn't been in touch or seen each other today. Michael Smith stood outside the master bedroom with the door closed. In that moment, he didn't even have the courage to push it open. How could he be so stupid as to take a chance on someone as smart as Amanda Green? Did he think she really knew nothing about all his behavior? But when did she know? How much did she know? And could he earn her forgiveness? Michael Smith remembered with trepidation what had happened years ago. They were both in college at the time. Because of the activities of the club, he and a schoolgirl got a little close. She had a crush on him, and it was obvious to everyone. Amanda Green told him twice, but he didn't take it seriously. After all, he loved her so much that he couldn't see another woman. Later, when the club dinner, he helped her to hold back the wine, and also sent her back to the dormitory. Amanda Green did not quarrel with him, and directly mentioned the breakup. He was blinded at that time, the sky fell. Later on, after the breakup for 6 months, he couldn't remember how he got through it. He also almost can't remember, he used how much effort, only to beg Amanda Green back to the heart. Gave him a chance to make up. Michael Smith's hands trembled as he pushed open the door. The room was dark, the bed clean and tidy. It was empty. It was as if even the scent that had belonged exclusively to her had disappeared with it. Michael Smith walked in quickly, pushing open every door in vain. Every room was empty. With shaking hands, he dialed her number. It was on, but there was no answer. Michael Smith braced himself to calm down. He lit a cigarette and took a drag. Fong pulled up David Brown's number and called it. David Brown, have someone look for it, now immediately have someone look for it and check it out. Mr. Chow, what do you want me to look into? He told David Brown about the clubhouse Amanda Green went to during the day. Where did she go after she left the club? Where is she now? Who has she been in contact with these days? David Brown, check her ID, airports, high-speed rail stations, bus stations, every place. Also, check her iPhone's location and let me know if you hear anything. Michael Smith turned and went downstairs and drove straight for the airport. There weren't many places she could go. Except for the small town of her hometown a few hundred miles away, the same city where her other best friend from college had married. Michael Smith tried to compose himself. He asked himself if he'd always done it covertly. No one around his friends he'd knocked around dared babble in front of her. Sophia Miller would dare even less. So maybe she'd just heard the occasional whisper. Maybe it was just that he was often home too late these days. Spent too little time with her and broke his word a few times. She was uncomfortable and wanted to teach him a lesson. Today is not the old days. They are husband and wife, all interests are tied together. She was in poor health and had been recuperating at home. Without him, she was like a bird let out of a gilded cage, she wouldn't last long. Michael Smith comforted himself. But it didn't seem to help at all. His heart was pounding all the way. His chest was boiling, and his whole heart was frying in oil and fire. In the middle of the red light, when he dialed her phone. Still no answer. When he got close to the airport, David Brown called. The wife left the clubhouse around 4 p.m. The video of the whole street has been blocked, we can't trace her whereabouts. We've checked the airports and high-speed rail stations, but there's no information on Mrs. Chow's whereabouts. Mr. Chow, maybe your wife is still in New York. Michael Smith clutched the steering wheel and let out a sudden sigh of relief. Go find her, no matter what, find her for me. And, did you get the iPhone's location? No, my wife's iPhone location seems to have been blocked and interfered with. Michael Smith's mind exploded and went blank. He couldn't hear what David Brown said. He only suddenly thought of what she had said that day when she had asked for the money. She said she had a gift for him too, in the communication room of her alma mater. As promised, he was to pick it up in 3 days, which was tomorrow. But he couldn't wait a second longer. It was well past midnight when he raced all the way to the school. The lights in the communication room had gone out long ago. Not caring much, he got out of the car and went over to bang on the door. The tip of his nose suddenly touched a coolness. Michael Smith subconsciously raised his hand to touch, but touched a cold snowflake. It was the first snowfall in New York. He and Amanda Green love, also in such a first snow. Michael Smith stood in a daze in the gradually dense snow. For a while, he was unable to return to his senses. It was only when Mr. Song called out to him several times in a row that he suddenly came to his senses. The handover, just a simple craft paper bag. The moment he received it, he was like grasping hot coals and subconsciously wanted to throw it out. Maybe he already guessed what was inside. Maybe he didn't want to face it at all. But in the end, he opened it. At first glance, there were 5 big words, divorce agreement. On the last page was her handwritten signature and fingerprints. Below that, there were some printed chat records. Other than that, she didn't leave him a single word. And yet, it seemed that what she had to say and do had already been made very clear. Those chat records, Michael Smith only looked at a glance, a handful of paper clenched into a ball. He handed Song a cigarette and apologized and thanked him kindly. Then drove and went straight to Sophia Miller's place. When he opened the door, Sophia Miller was sleepy, but joyful, and pounced on him to hug him. But she was blindsided by a slap in the face. Michael Smith did not say anything, just cold face, and a few slaps down. Sophia Miller's face was swollen and blood dripped from the corner of her mouth. She couldn't stand up from the beating and fell to the floor, covering her belly and crying for mercy. Michael Smith just looked down at her with condescending indifference. Then, without mercy, he kicked her in the stomach. Sophia Miller almost fainted from the pain and rolled on the ground, holding her stomach. Blood gushed out from between her legs, and the white carpet was stained red. But he still didn't think it was enough, bending down and clutching Sophia Miller's collar, almost lifting her whole body up. "What are you?" He pinched Sophia Miller's swollen face, causing her jaw to almost dislocate. His handsome face was almost hideously distorted. Yet his voice remained cold and calm. "How dare a sellout give my wife a hard time? I let you give birth only because I can't bear to see my wife suffer. Sophia Miller, who gave you the guts to harass my wife and make her angry?" Sophia Miller felt a blackness in her eyes. It hurt like a knife twisting in her small stomach, and she was scared to death of regret. Why had she been so greedy? Why did she want Mrs. Chow's position? If she gave birth to her child in peace, would she be able to have any less honor and wealth? "I don't dare, Michael Smith. I really don't dare. Please, save the baby. It's going to die. It's too late." Michael Smith pushed her away heavily in disgust. "Sophia Miller, you'd better pray to God that my wife forgives me and comes home with me. Otherwise, your life will be over. Michael Smith, this is your child too." Sophia Miller's body spasmed in pain as she lay helplessly on the floor, writhing in agony. Her hands, covered in blood, tried to grab Michael Smith. But he backed away to one side, watching coldly as she passed out in pain. Fong dialed, "Take the person to the hospital, just make sure they don't die." Michael Smith didn't even look at Sophia Miller and turned to leave the room. By the time he got downstairs, the floor was covered in a layer of white. Michael Smith was wearing only a shirt and pants, but he didn't feel the cold. He dialed Amanda Green's number again, and there was still no answer. Michael Smith lowered his eyes and looked at the wedding ring on his ring finger. It occurred to him that Amanda Green hadn't been wearing a wedding ring on her hand for days. Then, that day at the hospital. In fact, she saw and heard it all. But at that time, she did not question. She didn't even shed a single tear. How disappointed should she be in him? Michael Smith didn't dare to think about it, didn't dare to think about how Amanda Green felt at that time. Just as he couldn't find the words to describe what he was feeling at the moment. "I followed my teacher and headed straight to a small town in the northwest, thousands of miles away. The conditions were simple and the trip was intense. My teacher was always worried that my body would not be able to cope. But after surviving the initial discomfort, I gradually adapted to this fast-paced life and work. I switched to a new iPhone and number. However, the old iPhone was still on and the number was not cancelled, but just left at my place and not carried with me. I got calls and text messages from Michael Smith on my old iPhone almost every day. But I didn't answer or read any of them. When I got to the Northwest, I called Emily Johnson and briefly told her what happened with Michael Smith. Emily Johnson was so angry that she cursed Michael Smith on the phone for 10 minutes. "No wonder you ran off without saying a word. Bihan, Michael Smith has been looking for you like crazy these days. He even came to the hospital and blocked me several times. But I really don't know where you've gone, so it's useless for him to stop me. He seems to have asked all the students who are close to you." I instructed Emily Johnson, "If he asks for you again, just say you don't know." "I know, don't worry, I won't let him pester you. It's just, Bihan, are you coming back?" "Of course. I'll go back to divorce him." "What if he refuses to divorce me?" I smiled, "It doesn't matter, I'll be traveling all over the world and he won't be able to find me, so we'll just spend the rest of our time together. The Zhou family will definitely not agree, he is the only son and has the throne to inherit. After the call ended, a few of my siblings called me out for dinner. The dinner was again a mutton pot, and it smelled delicious. When I was in Beijing before, because of my poor health, I always paid special attention to my diet. Beef and mutton are to be eaten sparingly, for fear of not being supplemented. But now that I'm here, I'm following the customs, and I seem to be getting more and more energized. Teachers are laughing and joking. These days obviously see you look a lot more moisturized. It's not like when I first met you, there's no blood on your face. Isn't it because you were happy with your teacher and you eat well and sleep well? I brought my bowl to my teacher and leaned on her shoulder. How old are you? You don't have a straight face in front of your siblings. Teacher said in mock disgust, but at the same time, she put a large piece of meat into my bowl. Eat it while it's hot, eat more. I lowered my head and took a big bite of the meat, but my nose suddenly turned sour. I didn't want my teacher to see me cry, and with tears in my eyes, I ate all the meat in the bowl. When I got back that night, my old iPhone kept vibrating. Michael Smith didn't know what kind of drugs he had taken, and he kept calling moment after moment. After it finally calmed down, I sent him my first and last text. The divorce papers are signed and I will return to Beijing to finalize the divorce with you. Don't bother me about anything else, or else I'll permanently log off this phone. The moment the message was sent, Michael Smith called again. I still didn't answer. He didn't call a second time. After a long time, he replied with a single word, okay. The message was sent out. Michael Smith crumpled against the sofa, suddenly covered his face, and laughed silently. His friends sat on the side looking at each other, but no one dared to advise. These days, he was looking for Amanda Green to find crazy. Although not publicized out, but the circle has gradually spread. His mistress Sophia Miller is also quite miserable. I heard that the hospital was too late, the uterus did not save. Michael Smith, however, still refuses to let her go. Just a few days ago, the school has just been opened, her parents are ashamed of her, but also cut off the relationship. Now she's on thin ice. I wish I could burn incense and pray day and night to beg Amanda Green to come back. Michael Smith would let her live. But Amanda Green seems to have disappeared. No news at all. Brother Yen, was that a message from your sister-in-law just now? Someone asked boldly. Michael Smith leaned against the sofa, eyes closed, and was silent for a long time. Just when the crowd thought that he would not answer. But Michael Smith suddenly opened his mouth. She really doesn't want me anymore. There was a momentary freeze in the atmosphere. How could she? You've been in a relationship for so many years. When your sister-in-law's anger subsides, you should apologize properly, and she will forgive you for her soft heart. Michael Smith just shook his head. You guys don't know her. As soon as he spoke, the door of the room was suddenly kicked open from outside. It hit the wall heavily and made a loud clang. The crowd was startled and all turned to look back. Michael Smith also slowly sat up straight. He narrowed his eyes slightly and saw the visitor, but suddenly raised his eyebrows and sneered. So it's you, Alexander White. Alexander White didn't respond, nor did he look at anyone else in the room. He walked straight to Michael Smith. He kicked over the coffee table, then reached out and clutched Michael Smith by the collar. No one expected such strength from such a thin-looking man. The half-drunk Michael Smith was dragged to his feet and pressed against the wall. What, you want to fight? Michael Smith laughed sarcastically and harshly. Just before his words left his mouth, Alexander White swung his fist on his face. Michael Smith, I said it 5 years ago. If you treat her badly, I won't let you go. Michael Smith inclined his face as scarlet blood gushed from his nose. He raised his hand to wipe it away with mixed disinterest, then returned the favor with a heavy punch. The room was soon a mess. Bottles shattered, tables and chairs toppled over. The drunken Michael Smith was quickly losing ground and was kicked to the ground by Alexander White. Both men are badly bruised, with Michael Smith's entire face disfigured. Alexander White had a bloody cut on the back of his hand, dripping blood. Who the fuck are you? It's your turn to meddle in my and my wife's business? Michael Smith leaned back on the sofa with one leg supported, sneering. What, you heard we had a falling out, and you couldn't wait to get your foot in the door? It's just a shame, Alexander White. 5 years ago, Amanda Green chose me over you, and 5 years from now, it'll be the same. Alexander White slowly clenched his blood-dripping hand. The wound on the back of his hand crumbled even deeper, and it looked creepy. but he didn't even realize the pain. It was like a thorn was sticking in his heart, and the thorn was getting deeper and deeper. It drilled into his flesh, making it difficult for him to rest day and night. As a brother, I kindly advise you to stop thinking about other people's wives. Michael Smith smiled incredibly nastily. We've been married for 3 years, and slept together I don't know how many times. He deliberately stared at Alexander White's face with death, taking in every aching inch of his face, sucking in the thrill of excitement. All reason was gone. All he wanted was for Alexander White to suffer, to break. She gave me her first love, her first kiss, her first night. What are you going to fight me for, Alexander White? Everyone knows how much Amanda Green loves me. It's because she loves me that she can't keep her eyes off me. The more she messes with me, the more she proves she cares. So what's the point of coming all this way? You think you're gonna take advantage of the situation and get your hands on a girl? Don't even think about it, Alexander White. Amanda Green never had you in her sights, and she'll never love you. Michael Smith struggled to stand up, holding on to the couch. He was in a sorry state, but now he was standing in front of Alexander White, the former loser. He still had to stand tall. I'm not divorcing my wife. Die, in this life, you won't have a chance. Michael Smith. Alexander White looked at him as if a layer of frost covered the depths of his eyes. It was cold to the core, but also desperate. If only I could have seen you for the scum you are 5 years ago. I would have snatched her even if she hated me and resented me. Who are you to steal her from me? Or you're just a cheap bastard who likes other people's leftovers. Alexander White raised his hand and slammed his blood-stained hand on his jaw. He looked at Michael Smith, the bottom of his eyes bloodshot. I'll wait to see what you get. Michael Smith never really believed in retribution. But when he finally traveled all the way to that yellow sand-covered town. But when he finally arrived at the sand-covered town, he could only watch Alexander White find Amanda Green from the desert first. At that moment, he suddenly realized that his retribution had come. It came swiftly and unexpectedly. He was unprepared, and even more so, he was powerless. The yellow sand rolled up and covered the sky. He wondered if Amanda Green had seen him. He just watched as Alexander White carefully helped the injured her into the desert buggy. And when she got into the car, she was too weak and powerless, because she was too weak and powerless. It was Alexander White who carried her up there. He still followed that car to the hospital. Her teacher stepped in and stopped him. But let Alexander White follow him to the examination room. The wind stopped and so did the yellow sand. He shook the sand out of his mouth and lit a cigarette. One after the other, he couldn't stop. He asked her benefactor in a hasty manner, has she been following you here all this time? Yes, she works very hard and is very capable of suffering. She's not well. Michael Smith forced down the astringency in his throat. Has it been a hard time for her? The teacher lifted his jaw and looked at him faintly. No, she was happy. Michael Smith's eyes were frighteningly red. Maybe they were blown by the wind and sand. Teacher, do I have a chance? Will she forgive me? I really regret it, I know it's wrong. He was like a helpless but bewildered child. A tall man like that, grasping the teacher's sleeve, he almost burst into tears. I don't know, but I respect all of Bihan's choices. Teacher, help me, okay? But the teacher shook his head and pushed his hand away. Bihan is my favorite student, I know her very well and her temperament is very much like mine. No one can help you in this matter. But teacher, our 10-year relationship. So what? The teacher smiled indifferently but contemptuously. My ex-husband and I were married for 15 years. He even got down on his knees and begged me, but a dirty man is a dirty man, no different from garbage. Michael Smith, we women are not garbage collectors. If you're serious about your 10 years of love, set her free. The day the divorce was finalized, Michael Smith called out to me as I was coming out of the civil office. Wife. He looked stunned, and his whole body lost its vigor. Those eyes, once amorous but wanton, had long since dimmed. Call me by my name. Bihan. Michael Smith walked up to me and stood still. He looked at me keenly, and a faint light rose from the bottom of those dull eyes. We can still be friends, can't we? Let's start off as friends like we did 10 years ago. I shook my head, no. But Bihan. I interrupted him absolutely, Michael Smith. I said 5 years ago that the word forgiveness is not in my life's lexicon. Back then, I gave in and took a step back. So 5 years later, I got my comeuppance. Then let's not be friends, let's start as strangers, okay? You'll only give me one more chance, just this once, I swear. Michael Smith, don't you understand me? In your eyes, Amanda Green is nothing but a tough cookie. Michael Smith suddenly looked at me. You heard everything that night? I nodded lightly. Yes, I heard everything. The last bit of light in the bottom of his eyes shattered like ice cracking. But Bihan, you took away our favorite string of pearls and our wedding ring. You still can't let go of our love. He was like a man dying in the water, desperately trying to grab the last straw. But I shattered his last illusion. I burned them all in the jewelry workshop. Michael Smith, you can go down into the sewers and look for that so-called old love. I stopped talking to him and turned around to continue walking out the door. But Michael Smith soon came after me. You're going to be with Alexander White, aren't you? But every man under the sun is the same, Bihan. He's only doing it because he hasn't got you. Once he gets you, he'll make the same mistakes as I did before. So what? I looked at him with pale eyes. What's there to lose after going through a terrible ex like you? Are you going to marry him? I'll think carefully about marriage, but I'm still young and my favorite career and favorite man are totally compatible. You like him? I looked at him and smiled. Does it matter to you? I was standing on the side of the road waiting for a stoplight when I saw the parked car. Alexander White was leaning against the side of the car in his black punching bag on an early spring day. New gooseberry buds were sprouting from dead branches. Yet there was still a chill in the wind. He stood there quietly, but looked in the direction I was coming from time to time. Until the moment he saw me. He instantly stood up straight as the sun broke through the clouds. The sun broke through the clouds, and a faint, bright halo of light fell into his eyes. Amanda Green. He strides toward me. Before the signal lights turned green. As the frozen crowd began to flow. Turning into a note that bounces on the crosswalk. And I stood still and didn't move. Just watching him with a smile on my lips and a slight tilt of my head. Watching his long legs stride toward me like the most timeless of movie scenes. Amanda Green. He finally walked up to me and looked down at me. As if he was nervous, his breathing was a mess. As if the wind was so cold that it froze his ears slightly red as well. I looked up at him and remembered that extraordinarily unruly teenager from many years ago. It turns out that the countless chance encounters on the way to and from school are more than just chance encounters. It turns out that countless occasions when we bump into each other, it's not just a coincidence. I can't think of the time when I was in love with Michael Smith. I can't imagine how Alexander White felt as a bystander. When I turned him down and decided to stay with Michael Smith. That last look he gave me, that last smile, how much heartbreak he was holding back. It's just that love never makes sense. The young Alexander White and Michael Smith were two very different types. At that time, I was more sensitive and preferred Michael Smith, who could make girls happy. It seemed to be a natural thing to do. I don't regret the past. I just decided to move on. Been waiting a long time, haven't you? I asked him with a smile. Not long, just long enough. His hand, which was hanging down at his side, slowly lifted up a bit. It was as if he wanted to shake my hand, but then he stopped. Alexander White. I called his name and stomped my foot. It's cold in Beijing in the spring. Are you cold? Yes, it's so cold, my hands are freezing. I held out my hand to him, the tips of my fingers slightly red from the cold. Alexander White didn't say anything, but gently took my hand in his. He rubbed my cold fingertips until they gradually warmed up. Only then did he naturally take my hand and put it in his coat pocket. The signal lights turned green again. The crowd was once again alive and flowing. Alexander White took me by the hand and blended in. Spring is here, and it's getting stronger. It's a good time to fall in love.